There's one company in Colombia that's hoarding out that won't sell. It's kind of become the cause of celebration. They're also preying on the poorest communities, and you see that in this picture. I don't know why I keep pointing over there. Coca-Cola advertises in the US and overseas most voraciously in the poorest communities, where people already are undernourished and have little access to health care or dental care or clean water. There literally are parts of Latin America and India where you can't walk in any direction without being bombarded with Coca-Cola advertisements. And some of you may know about some of the history of Mountain Dew as well in the US and its efforts to get people addicted to it, especially in parts of Appalachia. Now believe me, I can tell you that part of me would love Diet Coke with a slice of lime right now. I think you'd find me pretty sophisticated if I was drinking that. But that desire is an example of privilege, of a sense of entitlement. It's not something that I need. When I say I need a Diet Coke, I don't need a Diet Coke. It's another example of putting my trivial needs ahead of other less privileged people's vital needs. Given the treatment of low-wage workers, given the child labor and the use of militia, how can I claim to be about social justice while I purchase and consume products made by Coca-Cola? If that's not enough, let's talk about plastic bottles. People in the US drink more bottled water, and the biggest selling bottled water in the US are actually sub-companies owned by Coca-Cola. People in the US drink more bottled water than people in any other country. We purchase a ridiculous 29 billion bottles every year. Making the plastic for all those bottles uses 17 million barrels of crude oil annually. That's about equal to the amount of fuel required to keep 1 million vehicles on the road for an entire year. So if you have a bottle of water with you right now, imagine filling 1/4 of it with oil. That's the amount used to produce that bottle. Then there's this, roughly 1,500 plastic bottles end up either in landfills or in the ocean. That's 1,500 bottles every second of every day. And of course, where are landfills most likely to be located? And I'll give you another hint. It's not near wealthy white neighborhoods. Okay, going on to my third example, Nikes. So I'm going to use Nike as an example here. I could choose nearly any popular shoe or clothing company, but I'm choosing Nike because I've been playing basketball for most of my life, and I always have said I need Nike basketball shoes. Here's a photo of my current basketball shoes that are Converse. Then I realized Nike bought out Converse. Right? So I've always said they fit me best. Nikes fit me best. I pay ridiculous amounts of money for Nike shoes, which really had nothing to do with fit and everything to do with that swoosh symbol. The symbol associated by some people with athletic prowess, with Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods, but associated by other people, a lot of other people, mostly poor people, with awful sorts of oppression. So let's think about this for a minute. I need Nike shoes. I often find myself and hear others using the word need to describe these sorts of trivial desires, and because I've been suckered into a consumerist frenzy, I pretend that it's a vital need. I need Nike shoes. Nobody needs Nike shoes. Nobody. It's like when I became a vegetarian, I would tell myself the reason I wouldn't become a vegan, even though I knew it was the right thing for me to do, was that I couldn't give up cheese. I would actually say that. I'd love to be a vegan, but I can't give up cheese. Given the whole history of human existence, only a tiny, tiny fraction of people ever have tasted cheese. To put it in sort of white privilege terms, that statement of need, that sense of entitlement to something so trivial, is the worst kind of privilege. It's the worst of what sits right at the intersection of white privilege and economic privilege. I am entitled to this land. I am entitled to this job. I am entitled to consume whatever the hell I want to consume, regardless of who is exploited. So I never needed Nikes, but I've probably bought 25 pairs of them over the course of my life. So why does this make me a racist and a macro-aggressor? Just 10 years ago, Nike faced criticism for slave-like child labor in its overseas factories. Almost all of this was in Southeast Asian developing countries whose workers regularly are exploited by U.S. corporations that make wealthy white people wealthier. We can point to all sorts of abuse of low-wage workers in Indonesia, including physical abuse and sweatshop conditions that would be illegal in the U.S. Some of the most egregious examples in Indonesia were found in a plant where most of the 10,000 workers are women who earn about 50 cents an hour. Nike dodges responsibility for these abuses by saying that they're happening in factories run by contractors. So Nike, one of the most powerful businesses in the history of the world, can't be held responsible for conditions because they've outsourced work to contractors. I call bullshit. Following what has become a theme in my example, sweatshops used by Nike have been shown to have close ties with the Indonesian military. Workers at these sweatshops have claimed that Nike factories pay the military to intimidate them. Also, facilities producing Nikes in Indonesia have been caught dumping factory waste into waterways, destroying local natural resources on which thousands of poor people rely. In Vietnam, activists uncovered that workers at the Nike facility were forced to work 65-hour work weeks for 15 to 20 cents per hour. In Haiti, workers were paid 30 cents per hour, and in many cases, this work is done in the most demeaning, dangerous conditions. In the Vietnam plant, for example, chemicals causing liver, kidney, and brain damage were found to be at 177 times the legal limit. So with whom, I have to ask, have I been standing? With them, with the activists, with people who are pushing back against the exploitation, with people who I claim to be connected with because of my activism? Oh, I didn't have the picture. With them or with them? Nike isn't alone, by the way. Recently I saw a list of clothing brands that are known to have abusive practices in developing countries. There's some of them. I've owned clothes from many of them. And there you go. So I think you get the point. I think you get the point that I'm a hypocrite. I'm a macro oppressor who contributes to all sorts of oppressions against already disenfranchised people. And I really have come to believe this. I cannot rightly call myself a fighter for racial justice while I continue to consume as I have spent my life consuming. I have come to believe that buying Nike shoes, purchasing Coca-Cola products, eating factory farm meat, among many, many other ways I support oppressive systems, is just as racist, just as oppressive as any other kind of racism. And this has been kind of a revelation to me, a difficult revelation, because it's forced me to rethink just about everything about how I live my life. I also know that when it comes to being a hypocrite, I'm in good company. That's Gandhi. You should recognize him. Recently I was reading a speech that Gandhi gave, and he talked about this, about how important to him being a vegetarian was. So he was making this connection. But what he said later in the same speech kind of blew me away. What he said later in this speech was basically that one of the biggest tragedies of his life was that he did not become a vegan. And I thought, okay, Gandhi's a hypocrite, right? He's calling himself a hypocrite. We're all hypocrites. And in some ways it's okay. In some ways it's okay, but we all have to find a way that we can be better about this. So I'm just going to sort of close here with saying that, just skipping ahead a little bit here. So I'm not asking us to feel ashamed or guilty, unless that works for you, if you're ashamed or guilty. I'm asking us to be mindful. So the same critical lenses we put on other forms of discrimination, we should also put on this. I'm asking us to be mindful, to apply those critical lenses, to consider a robust vision of racial and economic justice that includes taking stock of the ways in which we participate in these consumerist systems of racial and economic oppression. Again, it's not about feeling guilty to me. It's about being mindful. It's about being thoughtful. And it's about being consistent in my values. And this is something I trip over myself trying to do every day, and anyone who tries to do it, we're always going to be tripping over ourselves, but it's about striving. It's about striving. And that's the goal I will leave you with. Doesn't mean you have to give up all meat, but it means, maybe I'll try once a week not to eat meat and see how that goes. Or maybe I'll just be a little more thoughtful about where these eggs are coming from. It's about that. It's about that. So I think we're maybe a few minutes if anyone has questions. There's my contact information if you want to contact me. And thank you for your attention, and I'll take some questions if anybody has them. Questions or comments or criticisms? Hi.
I just have a quick comment. The first time I read that statistic about more than 50% of,
Carbon emissions.
Carbon emissions from factory farms, I was really just completely blown away. So I looked into it a little bit more, and it's really a lot of it has to do with it. Cows really aren't meant to digest the seed form of the grasses that they're eating. Like that puts them in severe intestinal and stomach distress.
Yeah. It has to do that. It has to do with just waste in general. Waste on pig farms is really terrible, awful.
Well, I mean, apparently a huge portion of carbon emissions come from cow flatulence, and that is something that just seems so ridiculous.
I'm all for the elimination of flatulence. I'm all for it. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you start looking into it and how all of the ways in which these factory farms are doing things to basically increase their profit, giving the cheapest possible feed they can provide and everything else. Yes, it is subsidized. Yes?
So how do you suggest to people without the means to, per se, go vegan or purchase fair trade clothing? I mean, because there is a premium markup on anything that seems to be fair that we'd be able to consume in the constructs of the society. What do you suggest to people who can't afford it?
Yeah, the markup isn't necessarily a bigger markup. It's more expensive because people were paid fair wages to produce it. What I decided to do was that, and this, again, I mean, we all figure out our own ways, and my ways aren't going to be everyone else's way. I just decided to not buy new clothes. So I could even see myself buying a pair of Nike shorts if they're from a thrift store, because the money that I spend for that doesn't go to Nike, right? So I would feel more. I mean, I try not to buy any clothes that advertise a brand. So actually, chances are I probably wouldn't buy the Nike shorts, but I can see myself doing that. So buying from thrift stores might be the thing, or other used. But again, it's difficult. People can't do all of that. If you're going to go to a job interview, chances are you're not going to buy your suit at a thrift store. Trying to find a suit at a thrift store that fits you might take years. So, but that's a way that I've done it. But again, I think it's just about being more conscious. So if I can identify the corporations that are the worst abusers, maybe it's about avoiding them. Maybe it's about keeping my eye open for when things go on sale that are produced. I mean, I really struggle because I don't want to buy leather stuff because of my commitment to animal exploitation. And I don't want to buy stuff that is made with unfair labor practices. To find